The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant, must, and decay. Even after all these years, the old hospital had its own scent, a memory that clung to the peeling wallpaper and rusted handrails. I waited just around the corner, heart racing, and watched as the visitor crept nervously along the cracked linoleum floor. It only took a moment. A scream, high and sharp, echoed down the corridor. They stumbled backward, tripping over a discarded gurney. I stepped out from the shadows, letting the candle flicker of the old emergency light catch my face, just enough to breach the shadows. Their breaths came in ragged gasps as they spun on their heels and ran for the end of the hall. And I grinned. This is why I return every year, every single year. The thrill of it, the timing, the perfect scare. It never grows old. Most of the seasonal staff don't last beyond their first Halloween season. New faces, eager but naive, think they can handle it. Some even whisper about me in the break room, bored, afraid, a little jealous. I hear them, but I never answer. I'm always elsewhere, focused, dedicated, perfecting every flicker of light, every groan of the floorboard, every shadow that moves just slightly too fast. The hospital has its secrets. Old patient rooms with rusted beds, stairwells that groan in protest when anyone dares to climb them, narrow corridors that seem to stretch forever. This is my playground. I know every corner, every hidden nook. The average employees may avoid the attic or the sub-basement, but I move there with ease. Every sound, every breath, every startled heartbeat, it's music to me. Every corner of this place has its own rhythm, its own secret for those who know it well. I've memorized it all, the squeak of a floorboard near the old X-ray room, the way the light from the emergency exit flickers just right down the hall, the soft moan of a ventilation shaft that makes a whisper sound like a scream. Timing is everything. I have my favorite spots. The abandoned nurses' station is perfect for a jump scare. The visitor rounds the corner, expecting nothing, and suddenly a shadow moves just as they pass the peeling counter. The old operating theater is my pride. Dim overhead lights, rusted instruments, the faint smell of antiseptic still clinging to the walls. If I step lightly, the echo of my shoes alone can make them freeze in place, waiting for something that isn't there, and that's when I strike. Some areas are trickier. The stairwell near the west wing creaks unpredictably, which can ruin a scare if I'm not careful. But when it works, oh, it works beautifully. A single step, a whispered groan, and a visitor freezes halfway down the stairs, their pulse echoing in the hollow walls. I watch, savoring every second, and sometimes I have to bite my lip to keep from laughing. The new employees watch me sometimes, curious and cautious. They have questions. How does he make that shadow move like that? Or, where do I vanish to after slipping back into the shadows? I smile, never offering an answer. I let them figure it out for themselves. Part of being good at this job is understanding the house in a way that can't always be taught. Props are another layer of my craft. I arrange them carefully, anticipating how a visitor will react. A rusted gurney, tipped just so, can create a sound that sets hearts racing before I even appear. A swinging door, a flickering light, a dangling IV line. I know exactly how to use these tools. And then there's the anticipation. Nothing compares to waiting in the darkness as footsteps approach, knowing that any moment, a scream will pierce the stillness. That moment when a visitor realizes they're not in control. That's why I do this. That's why I come back every year. Because no matter how many times I've done it, it never grows old. Over the years, a parade of faces has come and gone through these halls. Some left after a night or two, scared themselves by the very house they were supposed to manage. Some stayed a season, learned a trick or two, then vanished without a word. And a few had real talent. I remember Marcy, who could make a visitor jump with nothing but a whisper and a flicker of light. She had a timing that was almost surgical, precision in every movement. And then there was Danny, who discovered the joy of using the old gurneys in the West Wing. He could send a group of teens screaming down the hall without even touching them. I respected their skill, truly. Those were the nights when the air in the hospital felt electric, and you could almost hear the laughter of the house itself. The new employees, though, they're a different story. Watching them find their footing is endlessly entertaining. There's always one who hides behind the nurse's station, forgetting to check if the visitor is still coming. Or the one who swings the swinging door a bit too early, scaring themselves more than anyone else. I often stifle a laugh, careful not to give away where I am. They fumble, they whisper to each other, They try desperately to carve out their own style, and some of them actually surprise me. A creative scare, a clever twist on a classic, those are the moments I can't help but nod to in silent approval. It's strange, the way I watch them. There's a rhythm to learning this place, a rhythm to understanding fear. And while I may be years ahead in experience, I never forget the thrill of the first scream, the first perfect scare. The rookies may not know it yet, but that moment, when a visitor freezes and your shadow dances across their imagination, is everything. I move through the hospital like a silent judge, appreciating talent when I see it, amused by fumbling attempts, and quietly helping them understand the essence of what we do. There's an unspoken camaraderie, even if they don't know my thoughts. They become part of the season's story, and so do the ones who have left. The hospital keeps the memory of every scream, every clever trick, every little mistake, and I remember them all. The others laugh together in the break room. I can hear them sometimes through the thin hospital walls, sharing sodas, trading ghost stories, practicing jump scares on each other. It sounds nice, in its way, but I've never joined them. I tell myself it's because I'm dedicated, because I can't afford to break character. And maybe that's true, or maybe I just prefer the quiet of the halls when everyone else has gone. It isn't that I dislike them. I watch them, study them, even admire them when they find their stride. But I've never been one for chatter or small talk. My craft requires silence, patience, and intimacy with the dark corners of this place that they simply don't understand. To be part of the crowd would mean losing something, an edge, a focus. And so, I stay apart. Some of them whisper about me, I know. I've caught fragments of it in passing. Have you seen him? It's unreal. I swear he was there 1 second and gone the next. It's like he is part of the hospital itself. I smile at that one. If only they knew how close they were to the truth. They don't understand how much the house gives you, if you're willing to listen. The groans of the stairwell, the rattle of pipes, the sigh of wind through broken windows, all instruments waiting to be played. Most of them charge through the halls in clumsy costumes, banging on walls, shouting until their voices are hoarse. Me, I don't need theatrics. A single shadow at the right time, a whisper in the wrong ear, a flicker of movement at the edge of sight, and that's all it takes. It can be lonely, yes. Nights stretch long when you're the only one willing to haunt the deeper holes. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Isolation is the price of perfection, and I've paid it gladly. Because in those moments when the visitors scream, when their fear echoes down the corridors of this old hospital, I know I've done it right. And that is enough. That is everything. The season ends the same way it always does. The laughter dies down, the props are boxed up, the bright banners torn away. The others pack their bags, hugging each other like family, promising to stay in touch before scattering back to lives beyond these halls. I watch them go. I don't wave. I never do. The building grows quiet again, my kind of quiet. Dust settling, shadows lengthening, the heartbeat of the old hospital thudding beneath its cracked floors. It is in this silence that the truth always returns, as steady and familiar as my own breath. This is not a job for me. It never was. When I took this job, the hospital had only just closed. The walls still smelled of disinfectant, and the beds hadn't yet rusted through. They needed someone to frighten, someone who could slip into the bones of the place and make it live again. I stepped forward, and I never stepped back. Decades have passed since then, though the visitors never seem to notice. They see only what they expect to see, a performer, committed and skilled, someone so immersed in their role they forget to break character. That is my gift, my curse. No one asks why I never change, why I never age, why my name is never on the payroll. The others come and go, cycling through like patience once did. But I remain. The walls know me, the dark knows me, the fear that hangs in the air is mine to command. And when the lights are switched off, when the doors are chained shut for another long year, I do not leave with them. I never leave. This is my hospital, my stage, my grave. And so, when next October comes, I will rise again from the shadows, don my mask, and walk the halls, waiting for the moment someone new stumbles too close. And when they do, I will be there. Not pretending, never pretending, just haunting.
The air was heavy with perfume and wet earth. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts as the coffin lowered into the ground, the sound of shutters blending with the priest's weary voice. A wall of black umbrellas shimmered under the drizzle, like a forest of glossy crows. I stood at the front, face streaked with tears, shoulders trembling as though the weight of the world pressed down on me. My hands clutched the damp tissue until it tore between my fingers. I let out a sob that cut through the murmur of rain. It was perfect, raw, convincing. The family stood stiff and dry-eyed behind me, too polished to crumble. But the paparazzi didn't want them. They wanted me, the tragic young woman, broken by grief, the picture of love lost. I gave them what they needed. I always did. When the service ended, I bowed my head, whispering a name I had practiced the night before. Then I slipped away before the cameras could corner me for more. By the time I reached my car, the mascara had smudged into shadows beneath my eyes. My chest ached from the forced sobbing, but I was good at ignoring that ache. I slid behind the wheel, exhaled, and started the engine. For a moment, silence. Just the soft tick of the idling engine. Then I turned, casually, to the passenger seat. He was there. The man whose body now rested 6 feet under. Pale, gaunt, in the same immaculate suit I had watched vanish into the earth. His gaze was empty, but locked onto me, as if searching for something he couldn't name. I didn't scream, I didn't run. Instead, I pressed my lips together, wiped at my ruined makeup, and muttered, "Fine, I guess you're coming with me." His hollow stare didn't shift, but he stayed. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the graveyard. You're probably wondering what the hell you just saw. A girl, calm as anything, talking to a corpse that should be rotting in the ground. Let me back up and explain. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what I do, or what I'm paid to do. I'm an actress, or at least I used to be. The kind who knew how to cry on cue, how to let her voice break just enough to make people lean in, how to look shattered but beautiful all at once. Trouble was, Hollywood didn't care. I was one of a million faces waiting for a phone call that never came. But then came this job, mourner for hire. Yes, it's real. Yes, people pay for it. Wealthy people, mostly, men and women who built empires and reputations but forgot how to build anything human along the way. Their families want to soften the edges for the cameras, to convince the world the dearly departed was adored. So they hire me, I show up in black, weep like I've lost my heart, and the photographers eat it up. It's a disgusting business, but it pays better than waiting tables. And if I'm honest, I'm good at it, too good. Because unlike the others, I don't just pretend. I research. I learn who the person was, what scraps of humanity they left behind, a song they once loved, a charity they supported, an interview where they laughed, just once, without their mask on. When I cry, I'm not crying for the tycoon in the headlines. I'm crying for the child they once were, the human beneath the empire. And that, as I found out, makes all the difference. It didn't start with a shadow in the corner or a cold breath in the dark. That would have been easy to explain away, easy to laugh off. It started smaller. One night, after grieving the life of what everyone else saw as a stuffy hotel baron's funeral, I came home, poured myself a glass of wine, and collapsed onto the couch. My throat was raw from all the weeping, my chest sore from heaving sobs that weren't mine. I flipped on the TV for background noise and closed my eyes. That's when I heard it. A cough, just a single, dry cough. I froze. My apartment was too small for echoes, too cramped for tricks of sound. I muted the TV. Silence. I told myself it was nothing, drained my glass, and went to bed. The next morning, my radio alarm woke me with a song I'd never programmed, an old jazz piece, scratchy with age. I didn't recognize it at first, not until the chorus began. Its lyrics were familiar. I remember reading about it in a profile the night before. It was his favorite record, The Billionaire in the Ground. I shut the radio off and didn't turn it on again. But the signs multiplied. A faint cologne smell, sharp and expensive, lingering in my kitchen. A shape in the mirror behind me that vanished when I turned. Sometimes, when I walked through my apartment, the floor creaked as though someone was keeping pace just one step behind. It was like living with an echo that wasn't mine. I thought I was losing my mind. Stress, exhaustion, the toll of pretending to love the dead. But then came the night I couldn't deny it anymore. I woke to the sound of weeping. Not mine, not the muffled, controlled sobs I'd trained into an art. This was jagged, broken, a sound of someone who didn't know how to stop. The corner of my bedroom was darker than the rest, like the shadows had thickened there, heavy and wet. And in that dark, a figure sat slumped, face buried in pale hands. I couldn't breathe. My body screamed to run, but I stayed, frozen. Slowly, the figure lifted its head. His face was pale, sunken, the same I'd seen in photographs, the man I had grieved as though I loved him. His mouth opened, but no words came, just that hollow stare, pleading for something I didn't understand. I did what I had trained myself to do at funerals. My throat tightened, tears pricked my eyes, and I whispered his name. The sound filled the room. And then he was gone. After that night, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Stress and sleeplessness can do strange things. When the agency called me with another assignment, I jumped at the chance to bury myself in work. This one was a woman, a philanthropist, polished and distant. The kind of person whose name appeared on museum plaques and hospital wings, but whose family couldn't spare a tear. As usual, I did my research. Interviews, grainy old photographs, one trembling recording where she spoke about a childhood in foster care. That was enough. That was the string I pulled when I stood graveside and let the grief wash over me, pouring from a place I didn't know I still had. I gave them a show, the kind of sobbing that makes strangers ache, the kind of brokenness cameras adore. But when I slipped back into my car afterward, my stomach dropped. Because I wasn't alone. She was there too, the philanthropist, pale lips pressed together, eyes wide and searching, and beside her, just barely visible in the backseat, slumped the man from before, watching me through the reflection of the rearview mirror. My hands shook on the wheel. They didn't speak, they didn't move, they just looked at me, as they're waiting for me to explain what I'd done to them. It didn't stop. With each new assignment, another pair of hollow eyes began to shadow me. In the kitchen, I'd find the philanthropist standing in the corner, watching me rinse dishes. At night, the man sat heavy in the chair by my bed, his head tilted as though studying my dreams. Sometimes I'd catch them together, her weeping quietly, him pacing restless circles in my living room. And then there were more. A young heir who'd overdosed alone in a penthouse suite. A matriarch whose empire devoured her own children. Each one lingered, silent, desperate, clinging to the grief I had given him at the grave. I couldn't escape it. My apartment was crowded with shadows, my reflection framed by faces that didn't belong. Finally, I broke. I reached out to others in the business, the ones who showed up in black dresses and perfect mascara, cried on command, then went home laughing. I told them what I saw, what followed me, how the dead were gathering around me like children abandoned at a train station. At first, they stared, then they laughed. "You're taking the act too far," one said. "You're just tired," another insisted. One woman leaned in close, her red lips curved in a smirk. "Sweetheart, don't let the roles get to you. We don't actually care about them. That's the point." The others nodded, dismissing me like a child playing ghost stories. I wanted to scream, to shake them and force them to see the shadows of my shoulder. But their eyes slid right past the figures that loomed behind me. That's when I realized. It wasn't the job. It wasn't the act. It was me. The dead didn't just haunt my apartment anymore. They followed me. On the subway, I'd glance at the reflection in the dark glass of the window, and there they'd be. The man in his suit, seated across from me, hollow eyes never blinking. The philanthropist pressed against the door, lips trembling like she wanted to cry but couldn't. People around me didn't notice. To them, I was just another tired girl on the train. But to me, the car was packed with shadows no one else could see. At night, they grew bolder. I'd wake to whispers in my ear, breath cold against my cheek. Sometimes I'd open my eyes and see them gathered around my bed, standing in silence, like mourners at my funeral. I stopped sleeping, I stopped eating, my hands shook constantly, as if I'd caught some chill that never left. And still, the agency kept calling. More funerals, more faces, more shadows crowding in. Until the night I broke. I was in my bathroom, gripping the sink, staring at the pale stranger in the mirror. Mascara streaked my cheeks, my eyes sunken from sleepless nights. I told myself I was still me, that I was still whole. But when I blinked, there she was. The philanthropist, her face overlapping mine in the glass, her mouth opening where mine should be. "No," I screamed, slamming the mirror with my palm. The glass spider webbed, cracks splintering across her reflection. Behind me, in the doorway, the man stood, silent, watching. And in that fractured reflection, I saw all of them. The heirs, the matriarch, the philanthropist, the man, my apartment filled with their faces, their shapes crowding closer, pressing in, suffocating me. I fell to my knees, sobbing. "What do you want from me?" I screamed. "Why me?" The room went still. And in the silence, I understood. They didn't want to frighten me. They didn't want to harm me. They just wanted what I had given them. Once, in that moment when I learned their stories and wept for the lives they had lost. They wanted to be seen, to be grieved, to be loved, even if only in death. That was why they clung to me. Because I was the only one who ever had. I don't know what made me try it. Maybe instinct, maybe madness. I sat up, wiped my face, and looked at the philanthropist, the shadow that had haunted my nights. And I spoke to her, not as a ghost, not as a client, but as a person. I told her I was sorry she had grown up alone, sorry that her generosity had bought her statues and plaques but not love. Sorry that her final goodbye had been staged for cameras instead of for a family. And as I spoke, I felt the weight in the room shift. Her face softened, her eyes closed. For the first time, she looked at peace. And then she was gone. Not vanished like before, gone. The air in the apartment felt lighter. The shadows thinned. I turned back to the mirror. The cracks still webbed across the glass, but only my face stared back. For a moment, I almost believed it was over. But then I looked down the hallway. He was still there, the man, waiting, watching, silent. And I knew. This was only the beginning. The first time I truly understood what I was doing, it was raining again. I had just left another funeral, another shadow hitching a ride in the passenger seat. I kept expecting panic, dread, maybe even anger. But instead, I felt responsibility. I remembered the first moment I had grieved the philanthropist, how the weight of her loneliness had pressed against me until I knew it in my bones. It was a spark, tiny but unmistakable, a thread connecting my own heart to theirs. I began experimenting, not just crying for them, but speaking, telling them their lives had mattered, that their struggles, their small joys, their fleeting moments of humanity had been seen, even if no one else had. The effect was astonishing. Some would fade slowly after our conversations, lingering only as a light breeze or a shadow passing across a wall. Some stayed longer, drawn to my empathy, but even they began to ease. Their sadness, once jagged and suffocating, softened. I didn't need to fear them anymore. It wasn't immediate. The shadows didn't vanish in a blink. The man in the suit, who had terrified me with his silent presence, now sat quietly in the corner of my apartment while I worked, as if reading a newspaper he never held. He never scared me anymore. He wasn't waiting to harm me. He was waiting for my acknowledgement, my care. Another hummed while I cooked, a song she had loved in life. Another, a young air, would appear only when I sat at my desk, leaning over my shoulder like a shy child seeking approval. I stopped screaming. I stopped hiding. I spoke to them as naturally as I would a friend, a mentor, a patient I had vowed to help. And in return, they gave me their trust, their presence, their gratitude. I realized then that this was my job, not for the money, not for the cameras, not for anyone else. It was for them. I drive to funerals now with a sense of purpose I've never had on stage. The first 5 minutes, I perform for the press and the families, just as I always have. But once the service is over, the grief I give is real, drawn from the knowledge I've collected about them, from the care I've cultivated in secret. And the shadows come, always. They follow, but they no longer haunt. Sometimes the passenger seat is empty, sometimes full. Sometimes there's the soft hum of laughter, or a sigh of relief, or a faint brush of fingers against mine in thanks. I smile, I speak their names, I tell them their lives were seen. I know now that loneliness is a powerful thing. It latches onto the living, the dead, the desperate, the forgotten. And sometimes, the only thing that can lift it is a single human willing to care. I used to be terrified of the shadows. Now, I wouldn't trade them for the world. I work at a diner. Most people think it's ordinary, neon sign, checkered floors, mugs clinking against plates. But I've been on the midnight shift long enough to know otherwise. The clock on the wall ticks slower here, or maybe faster. I can't tell. It doesn't matter. What matters is the time between 12:17 and 3:42. That's when everything changes. The shift begins at 10. The place hums with the familiar quiet of late night work. The hiss of the coffee machine, the faint sizzle from the kitchen. The regulars trickle in, strangers at first glance, but even in these hours, I can feel something different. By 12:15, I can feel it pressing in, like the air itself is holding its breath. The neon open sign in the front window flickers once, twice, then dies. That's the cue. The diner transforms. No one speaks. Not the staff. Not the customers. I can't speak. My co-workers can't speak. Even our gestures are measured, precise, like we're part of a ritual we don't fully understand. Only the sounds of silverware on plates, the gentle slide of cups across counters, break the silence. Every clink is louder than it should be, echoing in the empty spaces between us. The first of them arrives from across the street, from the cemetery. At first, they look human, ordinary late-night patrons. But the way they move, the way their eyes glint under the dim lights, is different. They sit and wait, quietly. They order, each meal a memory of a life once lived, a joy once known. I serve them without menus, without conversation. I nod, I point, I gesture, nothing more. Sometimes, they try to tempt us. A tip left on the table, shiny and bright. I avoid it, leaving it set aside. A glance that lingers too long, a question that hangs in the air, my fingers freeze mid-motion, and I respond only with the smallest tilt of my head. Every rule is a tether, keeping something contained, though I'll never know exactly what. The staff don't speak to each other either. We move in tandem, silently, rehearsed, every step choreographed by some unseen hand. Shadows stretch unnaturally, bending along walls and floors. Reflections in the chrome counters don't quite match what I see. Chairs shift just slightly when I look away. The air tastes heavier here, thick with something I can't name. And yet, the ghosts smile. They eat, they sip, they're content. Their joy is real, their satisfaction is real, but I can't shake the feeling that all of it exists just out of reach of reason, like I'm watching something that shouldn't exist, yet it does. Time passes differently here. The minutes drag like hours, and the hours slip like water through fingers. I watch the clock, 12:17, 12:45, 1:03, 2:11, 3 o'clock. Every tick brings the quiet closer to something tangible, something aware. I don't know what happens if the rules are broken. I don't want to find out. I only know the rules exist. 5 of them, simple, unyielding, necessary. And so I work, I serve, I observe. In the eerie silence, with only the clink of silver and the soft slide of plates, I do my job. Because if I ever speak, if I ever break the rules, if I ever step outside between 12:17 and 3:42, I don't know what will happen. I don't want to know. The hours between 12:17 and 3:42 stretch endlessly. The diner's lights are dim, shadows pulling in corners that should have been empty. I keep moving, taking orders, refilling coffee, clearing plates. The staff move alongside me, silent and exact. Every gesture matters, every glance avoided. That's when they start testing me. A new face slips in through the door, or perhaps it's always been there, waiting. They sit at the far corner table, posture too straight, hands folded in a way that's just slightly unnatural. I approach, nod politely, tilt my head toward the specials board, and the ghost tilts his head back in response. Not a word, nothing, but the eyes, they pierce through me. I slide their plate toward them without speaking. They glance at it, then at me, then they place something on the table. A coin, shiny and heavy. I hesitate, my fingers freeze. Reflexively, I avoid it, my gesture awkward, deliberate. The tip will vanish as soon as my back is turned. They try again, subtle this time. A question lingers in the air, unspoken, like it curls around my ears. Do you see me? I do, but I can't answer. Not with words, not with sound, only a tilt of the head, a slow gesture toward the chair. Their smile widens, not in mockery, not in anger, but in amusement. The test has begun, and I am the subject. Other patrons move through the diner with quiet contentment, unaware, or pretending to be, of the tension building around me. The clink of silverware, the soft slide of plates, every sound amplified in the unnatural silence. Each echo reminds me of the rules, the thin boundary keeping this place contained, controlled. The clock ticks, 12:58, shadows stretch along the walls, creeping closer, or maybe it's just my imagination. Every movement I make is watched, every tilt of my head calculated. My hands shake slightly as I pour coffee. I cannot speak, I cannot meet eyes for more than a fleeting second. I cannot accept a tip, no matter how innocent it appears. And yet, the ghost across the room leans forward slightly, and for a moment I think I see curiosity, maybe even something like desire. I feel it tug at the edges of my mind, a pull to break the rules, to speak, to respond. The tiniest urge, the smallest crack in my focus, could be all it takes. I swallow hard, I keep moving, I serve, I nod, I point, I gesture, nothing more. The diner hums with silent life around me. Ghosts, shadows, time itself, all bending in the space between the seconds. I am part of it now. I am tethered to it, bound by rules I do not fully understand. And I tell myself, quietly, without words, that I will survive this shift. By now, the diner is alive in ways most people could never notice. Not with sound, there's still only the clink of silverware, the faint slide of cups on the counters, the soft scrape of chairs. But in the way the light moves, the shadows bend, the reflections betray the truth of what is here. I move from table to table, serving plates with care, nodding, gesturing, avoiding eyes. The ghosts eat with joy, their faces calm, serene, lost in memories of lives they once lived. Their contentment is contagious, almost comforting. But there's always that other edge, the one that makes my stomach tighten and my hands shake. I glance at the chrome counter. My reflection is there, or it should be. But my reflection lags, just a fraction, like it's a moment behind, a second off from my movements. I blink, and it matches again. I shake my head, telling myself I'm imagining it. A chair scrapes against the floor behind me, slow, deliberate, though no one has moved from that corner. I spin, ready to catch a staff member at fault, but the spot is empty. The shadows stretch along the wall, longer than they should be, curling around corners, creeping toward the center of the room. One ghost smiles at me, the corners of their mouth lifting in perfect, serene contentment. They tilt their head, just slightly, and I feel it, a pull at the edge of my mind, subtle and insistent. Not a question, not a word, but something that makes me want to break the rules. Speak, move, interact in ways I shouldn't. I grip the tray tighter. I pour coffee carefully, silent, measured. A plate slides along the counter, too slow, too deliberate, and I catch it with a small, practiced gesture. Nothing more. Time bends. Minutes stretch and collapse, shadows ripple across the walls, and the diner itself feels aware. I sense eyes in the corners where there are no eyes, whispers in the silence that aren't there. The rules keep me tethered. No menus, no speaking, no tips, no eye contact, no leaving. I obey. I survive. And yet, every clink of silverware, every slide of a cup, every soft scrape of a chair against the floor tells me the diner is waiting. Watching. Learning. The customers eat. They smile. They're content. And I move, silently, tethered to the rules, bound by the silence, surrounded by shadows that stretch a little too long, reflections that lag, and a world that bends just enough to make me question whether I am still in it, or if I ever really was. The hours stretch between 12:17 and 3:42, heavy and slow. Every movement I make must be precise, measured, silent. The diner hums only with the clink of silverware on plates, the slide of cups across counters, the scrape of chairs against the floor. They don't speak, not that it matters to the spirits. The ghosts arrive from the cemetery across the street, sit, and enjoy their meals as if nothing is strange at all. I serve without menus, without words, without acknowledgement beyond the smallest nod or gesture. They don't notice. They don't need to. A ghost lifts a fork to their lips, pausing as the flavors bring a memory to the surface. A roasted chicken, a simple dish, but their face relaxes, a smile tugging at the corners of their mouth. Eyes closed, they savor it, reliving a Sunday dinner long past, warmth, laughter, the faint scent of herbs carried on the air. I watch, silently, feeling the weight of the rules pressing down on me, the oddness of my own restraint. Another ghost stirs a bowl of sweet corn pudding, their fingers tracing the rim as if it unlocks a memory. Their joy is complete, and they glance at me only briefly, curiosity flickering for a second, like I am the strange one here, the one who does not speak, who does not eat, who moves like a shadow between tables. A third ghost leans slightly forward, unaware of my vigilance, eating a slice of apple pie with eyes closed, letting the sweetness and warmth take them to a remembered kitchen decades ago. Their contentment is absolute, yet every gesture I make to serve them, nod, tilt, step aside, feels heavy, deliberate, ritualized. They would not understand the rules if I tried to explain them, and that is what makes it all the more isolating. The diner hums with life that is completely unaware of its oddities. I move, I obey, I serve. The ghosts eat, they remember, they smile. And I remain the silent observer, tethered to 5 simple, unspoken rules, in a world that sees me as the odd one. By now, the silence has become a weight pressing down on my shoulders. Each clink of silverware, each faint slide of a cup across the counter, resonates louder than it should, echoing in corners that feel far too deep. Shadows stretch and curl along walls where no one stands. Reflections lag, ever so slightly, in the chrome counters, the polished glass of the windows, mirrors I don't dare meet fully. The ghosts move through their meals as if nothing is odd, lifting forks to lips, tasting, pausing, savoring. A roasted chicken here, a bowl of creamy corn pudding there, a slice of apple pie dusted with cinnamon. Their faces tell me everything. Laughter from a forgotten kitchen, warmth from a family meal long gone, the bittersweet nostalgia of life remembered in bites of food. And still, they glance at me sometimes, curiosity flickering. They do not understand me, the odd one moving silently among them. I move with care, obeying the rules without thought. No words, no menus, no tips, no eye contact, no leaving, My hands shake slightly as I pour coffee. My gestures are precise, practiced, ritualized. Even the staff cannot speak, not during these hours. And yet, the diner itself begins to fray at the edges. Chairs shift ever so slightly when I look away. Shadows ripple, stretching toward corners that shouldn't exist. Reflections waver, a momentary lag betraying shapes that aren't mine. The neon sign outside is dark, but its light still pulses faintly in the glass, a heartbeat I cannot touch, a presence I cannot name. Time moves differently here. Minutes stretch, then collapse, bending around the room. I wonder if I have always been here, or if I've only arrived this shift. My pulse quickens, and yet I do not speak. I cannot. I obey the rules. I survive. The ghosts eat. They remember. They smile. And all I can do is watch, silent, tethered to 5 rules that bind me as tightly as the shadows that stretch along the floor. The diner hums with life that is not aware of itself, yet alive nonetheless. And I am caught in the center, the odd one, the observer, the silent keeper of the ritual. Each plate I carry, each nod I give, each gesture I make is a lifeline, a tether to reality that feels increasingly fragile. The longer the night drags on, the more I sense it bending, the more I realize that in this silence, in this routine, I may be the one being observed as much as I observe. And still, I move. And still, I obey. And still, I survive. The clock ticks past 3. 3 o'clock, 3:17, 3:28. Each minute drags, heavy and sticky. The diner feels smaller, though the shadows have stretched longer than any wall should allow. I move from table to table, silent, careful. Every clink of silverware echoes like a bell in a cathedral. Every slide of a plate is magnified, amplified by the emptiness around me. The ghosts eat without awareness, oblivious to the tension pressing down on me. A bowl of creamy corn pudding, a slice of apple pie, a plate of roasted chicken, each meal a memory resurrected in flavors and scents. Their eyes close, their lips twitch in feigned smiles, and I watch, silently, as though the joy they experience is some fragile thing I must preserve. They are unaware of the rules, they do not understand the silence. But I am aware. A reflection in the chrome counter catches my eye. My own movements lag a fraction behind reality, a twitch delayed, as if some other presence is mimicking me, waiting for a misstep. I step back instinctively. Shadows ripple along the walls. Chairs shift as I look away, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. My pulse thrums in my ears. I have been here before. Every night, for weeks, months, perhaps longer. And still, the rules hold me. No menus, no words, no tips, no eye contact, no leaving. I obey. I survive. One ghost lifts a fork to their lips, tasting his meal. A smile stretches across their face. It is not meant for me, not directed at anyone, yet I feel it brush against my consciousness like a warning, a reminder that I am different. The diner hums quietly around us, alive in ways I cannot name. I feel it then, at the edge of perception. A pressure in the air, a pull in the shadows, a tug at the lagging reflection in the counter. The rules press in on me, tighter than ever. I must not speak. I must not move too quickly. I must obey. 3:42. The neon, open, sign flickers back to life. The shadows shrink, the reflections stabilize, the air lightens. The ghostly patrons, still unaware, continue to eat, to remember, to savor the last bits of life that linger in their meals. The diner exhales, releasing its hold, and I am left standing, trembling, silent, but alive. The shift will continue until 5, but the window has passed. The rules relax. Words are allowed. I can finally speak to the other staff without fear. Yet I know it will begin again tomorrow. 12:17 to 3:42, the hours that bend reality, test my mind, and remind me that the diner is not quite ordinary. That I am not quite ordinary. And I will return. Because it is my job, and this is my life.
Thank you for hanging around until the end of our tale. Every view is appreciated. If you have enjoyed it, please hit that like button and considering commenting and subscribing.